Right. In this video, I'm going to create another new project here, and we'll call it Pinball Horizontal. And we need a location, Pinball Flat, and we'll build that game. And I'm going to create a standard pinball flipper device as quickly as possible here in Unity. So it won't be an entire pinball table. We're really just going to focus on the flippers because collisions and counting points and things like that are going to be very similar to other games that you might create, whereas hitting the ball with a flipper is kind of the focus of this particular little video. Before we do anything, I want to focus on making a ball. So I'm going to use a stock sphere, a primitive sphere. I will call it the pinball, and it needs a material. So I will head to the project and create a new asset. It's just going to be a simple material, and I'll call it chrome because I want the ball to look somewhat chrome-like. I'm going to keep the full 255 of strong color, there, make it as bright as possible. And then I'm going to make it as smooth and as metallic as possible so we have something resembling chrome. And I'll take that material and put it on the ball. Now this pinball so far only has the sphere mesh and the mesh renderer and the standard collider, but it doesn't have a physics model. So I'm going to add a physics rigid body. And I want the mass to be fairly strong, but not crazy strong. So I'll set it to 2, but I don't want any angular drag and no regular drag. So I'll set that to 0. Now I want to see what the ball looks like here in the camera view. All right, let's bring that up because I want to make sure that the ball falls, that the ball is responsive to gravity. Great. It seems simple, but it is important. Now I want a playing table, or essentially a deck, for the ball to ride on, to roll around on. I'm going to use a cube for that. So I'll right click and create a new 3D object. I'll use a cube. I'm going to make it, say, I don't know, 11. Let's make it 22 wide and say 44 long. So it's twice as long as it is tall. And I'll save that. And I would like to be able to see things a little bit better. So I'm going to give it a new material. So right click, create material, and I'll call this deck because it'll be the playing deck. And I'll go with something just to differentiate it from other pinball video. So how about dark magenta? No, let's go more blue. Kind of a dark navy blue kind of quality. Yep, we'll work with that. And I want it to be as smooth as possible. I'm sorry, not quite so smooth and not metallic, kind of a soft velvety quality so that we'll be able to see the chrome ball in comparison. And now I want to move the camera so that I can see the entire playing field. So I'm just going to line up my work view here and then select the camera, come up to game object and select align to view. Okay, save. Let's see what we get here. The ball should hopefully fall and just strike the deck, and that's it. Now the ball isn't rolling towards us at all, which is sort of what we would want in a pinball machine. And the first instinct, I would think, would be to take the deck, select it, and rotate it, right? So that it rolls toward the camera, something like that. And that would work, but I feel that it makes controlling the flippers and any kind of rebounds or collisions to collect points or ramps or anything like that a little bit more difficult. So what I'm going to do is reset the deck back to 0 and adjust the world because this is a video game. I don't have to respond to reality if I don't want to. So I'm going to come on up to Edit, Project Settings, and I'm going to take my project settings and I'm going to come here to Physics, and I'm going to head on over to gravity. And I don't have to accept normal gravity at all. So I do want the ball to fall towards the deck. That would be negative on the y-axis, but I probably don't need quite so much, so I'll put -8. But I do want it to fall toward the camera, which is on the z, closer to the bottom of the z-axis. So a positive number would be pushing away from the arrow. So I'll go with a -5 to start. Let's see what we get. I'm going to close this, save, and see if that's enough. We want it to move fairly quickly, and we can adjust materials. Oh, but here comes the ball. I like that. I would like the ball to move a little faster toward me. So one more time, I'm going to head back to project settings, back to physics, and I'm going to crank this up, maybe -11. I am guessing until I find something I like, and I think 11 is probably going to be where I want. It's going to be a little more than twice as fast as it was. Yeah, that looks good. I want the ball to be able to move. And as we can see, the deck is still totally level, but we've changed gravity. This means that now when I make flippers and I try to rotate them, I don't have to use any strange Oilers on the angle of the flippers. I can just keep everything on the y-axis. That's what I want to do. In order to keep the ball in play, I am going to throw in some walls here. I think you're going to understand what I'm doing, so I will go ahead and fast forward as I build these walls. And so we have a workable playing field where the ball is entrapped so it doesn't roll off the deck. Let's see what we have. Comes on in, hits the bottom, comes to a stop. Yep, that's pretty much what we're looking for. I'm going to now reposition the ball closer to the top as its stock start location. Now, in order to get the ball to roll more smoothly, I am going to create a basic physics material. I want it to be as glassy as possible. So I'm going to select physics material. I'll just call it glass. So it kind of acts like glass. I don't want, or maybe I should have probably called it ice, but we'll go with glass. And so I don't want any static friction or any dynamic friction. I like that. I'm going to find the deck, and we have a physics material right here. And I'm going to apply that as a physics material onto the playing field. And I'll find the ball, which we also have a physics material, and I'll apply that glass there. Great. So that's our base playing field. Now we're going to create some basic flippers, which is the primary point of this video. So I don't need the sphere collider and rigid body right now. I am going to come back to collisions later after I have the paddles set up. But for right now, let's look at this from the top. There we go. And I'm going to want to create a new 3D object, which is going to just be a cube. And I'm going to make this cube into a paddle. So let's get that above the playing field where we can see it. And I feel like I'm just going to keep it as stock as I can, but obviously it needs to be wider. So I'll go with, let's go with 8. So we'll kind of move this over to the side. I'm going to make this the left paddle just to get started. And I want to move it into the playing surface area so it's close, right? We want it to be pretty close, but it doesn't need to touch. And I like that sort of lift of 1. So I'll move it down just a little bit, and that should work. I like that. That's kind of nice. The ball is going to fall toward it. I'll move it down here and bring it in just a little bit and save. And now I want to make sure, as simple as it might be, that the ball actually collides with it. So let's just make sure. Yep, happy, like it. The easiest way to get this thing to move the way I want it to might seem to be just to simply select the object and program in rotation. The downside is that if I rotate the object with a simple rotation, it will rotate on the center. And that's not really a flipper, right? That is a rotating object like a rotating door, but we want a flipper, and we want that to rotate from, say, the lower left corner of the object itself. So I am going to use a hinge joint. When I do so, when I add that component, which is part of the physics model, I'll go to physics, and we can find it here. Here it is, hinge joint. And when I do so, it's going to automatically add a rigid body so that you can measure and react to collisions with other objects. In this case, I am not interested in angular drag at all. So I'm going to take that out. But I want to move the hinge joint. It might be a little hard to see here on camera, but there's a fourth brand new tiny little brownish grayish arrow right here. And that points the angle and vertical direction of the brand new hinge. And right now it's in the center. I need to move it here I want it in the left corner of this cube. So here it is. The anchor is what we're actually interested in. I'm going to set the Y to 0, and I'm going to move the X to, I believe, a negative number. So maybe -0.5. There it is. We can see it just really faintly here on the left. Sorry if that's not ideal for you, but we can see that it is right there in the center on the left. We're going to pull it back toward the corner, and we're going to change its axis. So right now it's pointed to the right on the x-axis. These axes work as on, 1, or 0, off. So I'll turn the x off, and I'll turn the y on. And now we can see that the arrow is pointed straight up, which is essentially what we want. That becomes the vertical hinge point. And we're going to move it back toward the bottom corner here because that's where I want it to rotate. You can, of course, change this as much as you want. But I think this is going to be a negative 0.5, if I remember correctly. And there it is. So it's now on that lower angle. We'll go ahead and play the game and see how it rotates now. Because it's a rigid body, it will respond to gravity. We have changed gravity. So let's see how this goes. Very nice. It just sort of swings down and drops. And as a matter of fact, in order to see this a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and turn off a couple of the walls here. So I'll turn off that wall, and I'll turn off the bottom wall for now. The ball is just going to roll right off the playing field, but let's look at the flipper. There we go. We can see the flipper is responding to gravity and swinging on its hinge point. That is exactly what we want. At first, we would like this flipper to stop at a specific location. So we do want it to fall, but then we want it to stop. We don't want it just swinging around in this case. I'm sure you can think of a lot of different ideas now, bats, propeller blades, baseball bats, golf clubs, propeller blades. But in this case, we want a flipper that comes to the bottom and stops. And we can do that by constraining the angle. So right here, we have a useful element here in Unity called limits. I'll twirl that down. And I'm going to guess at the beginning that maximum limit is, a negative 33? Well, I guess the maximum would be a positive number. That does make sense. So minimum will be negative 33, maximum will be 33. And we need to tell the object that we want to use limits, right? So that's right here. So we'll turn limits on, otherwise it will ignore whatever I put in. I also don't want to bounce. I'll just turn that off. Okay, let's save that, and hopefully it will swing down a bit and then stop because we have use limits turned on. Yep, there we go. So it swings down to a normal flipper level and comes to a stop. Awesome. So in order to control the flipper now, because it's a rigid body, I can simply add some force. And in doing so, I am going to add a script. So I'm going to go and use a visual script, new script machine, and I will need an absolutely new one. So I'll click on new, and I'll just call this left flip, because I know I'm going to need a right one. So we'll come to that in a bit. We'll call this left flip, and I'll title it left flipper. There we go. And let's edit that graph. I don't need the on, start, or update events, so I'll just delete those. And I want a keyboard interaction in this case. It's up to you to set your controls, but I'm just going to keep it simple. I want an on keyboard input, which is an event. And I'll set this to the A key because it's going to be the left flipper. And there it is. And I want that on hold. So I can push down, or I can push down and hold the A key. When I do so, I'm going to add force because it's a rigid body. I don't need anything really complex. I'm simply going to add force to the blue axis, which is the Z. So that's X, Y, and Z. We'll add 5. I think I'll need more, but we'll start with 5. Falls down, I push the A key, and it moves. As you can see, when the ball struck the flipper really couldn't resist. So let's see that again. I'm going to try to hit it with the flipper. And I was holding down the A key the whole time. It just was not enough strength to move the ball. So let's add a lot of force, maybe 55. Start with that. Run it again. And the ball passed through the flipper, which brings me to my collision issue. We did see it go through the flipper the first time, and that has to do with collision. I want to change the name of my cube. I forgot to. There we go. And I'm going to come down to the rigid body, and I want it to measure collision. So that's collision detection. But instead of discrete, which doesn't use a whole lot of memory or processing power, I'm going to change it to continuous dynamic, which will use the maximum amount of measuring possible. I'm also going to apply that to the ball itself. So instead of discrete, I'm also going to make it continuous dynamic. That's going to use up more memory, but in this case, we really need this collision reaction to be as accurate as possible. Here's A. There we go, no problem, but let's watch that again. Let the ball get up some more speed here. And you can see that we were able to sort of gather and push the ball forward. I want more force out of that, though. So I'm going to go ahead and really crank this up. Maybe let's just go with maybe 777 and run it again. And that puts a lot of force into the ball, and that is kind of nice. I'll turn the wall back on so that we can see what's going on with the ball. Now that we've seen the flipper rotate, we know it's not going to strike the wall. That's pretty good. The ball doesn't bounce or ricochet off the wall. That's another physics material that might be necessary. But when we push the button, that flipper really gets up there, but it takes a long time getting back. And we can solve this in a couple of different ways, but the way I'm going to solve it is to try to reduce the force so that the hinge over here on the left, when we see the maximum amount of force being applied, the hinge seems to jump around, but we also don't see the flipper come back the way we want it to. So I'm going to make sure the mass on the flipper is significantly more than the ball. So I'll set that up to about 11. And I'm going to come down to the hinge joint, and I'm going to turn on the spring. So we have a use spring option. I'll turn that on. And I'm going to set the target destination or the target angle to be at the bottom. So we want it to snap all the way back to its resting state as quickly as possible. I believe that's 33. And I want that spring rate to be pretty strong. So I'll set it up to, I don't know, 55. We'll start there and take a quick look. Let's run that. So now hopefully the paddle will snap back to its stopped location a little bit more quickly. We have a lot more force, and let's run that again. So the ball reacts nicely. The flipper doesn't actually move up as fast as I want it to, but we can see that now with the spring rate in there, it's not jumping off of the hinge in any way, but it's also not coming back to the finished location as quickly as I would like it to. So I'm going to up that spring rate a lot, and then I'm also going to upgrade my force again to 999. And that will probably be workable. You can keep toying with these until you're happy, but it looks like we've got, a paddle that moves back at a reasonable speed, doesn't jump off the hinge. We can probably make it faster in both directions. So maybe 777 here, or no, let's just go ahead and make it 888, and I'll crank up the force to a little over 1,000. I'll save that, and we should probably be able to get it to move quickly in both directions. So it snaps down pretty quick, jumps up, and the ball reacts to the paddle pretty well. So that looks more like a paddle you might use. So that's a pretty acceptable paddle to me. Now we just need 2 of them. So I'm going to take that left flipper over here in the hierarchy. I'm going to right click it and duplicate, and I'll rename that to right flipper. I'll move it over to the side, and that'll be kind of nice if you needed 2 paddles or 2 flippers that moved exactly the same, because right now when I push the A key, both of them will move at the same time, which is sort of like windshield wipers on a car. Kind of nice. And so now I'm going to go ahead and move the anchor point and then realign the key. So we'll need another script, but for right now, I like that all the rates are all set up exactly the same. I simply want to move the hinge point from the left to the right. And so I believe I just need to go from -5 to 0.5, or -0.5 to 0.5. And there it is. Let's test that. So they should now flip and mirror. Well, I can see that I need to adjust the spring on the right one, because the spring and both are working exactly the same. We can see the right one is sort of being pushed up while the left one is being pushed down. That should be a pretty straightforward flop. Spring damper target position, -33. Save that and make sure that I got that right. Much better. There we go. I'm pushing the A key only. So we want to take that right one and set it so that it is on the D key, I guess, as an example. So that will need a different script. So I'll twirl up my hinge joints now in the inspector. I'll come on down to the script machine and I'll set that to none. And now I'll add a brand new script, and that will be right flip. And once again, I don't need those two elements. And I can quite easily just take both of those. I'll select them both and I'll copy the selection, go to the other flipper and get into its script graph. Make sure I should title this right flip. I like that. And I'll come on down into its edit graph and paste. And of course, I don't want it on the A key. I would like it on something more traditional, so I'll go with the D keyboard key. But it is the same force. Now they're on separate buttons. So let me see what I get here. Test that. A key, D key. A keyboard button, D keyboard button. A keyboard button, D keyboard button, both. And there we go. And there are our flippers. The ball is being pulled by the adjustment of gravity. The deck itself is still flat, so I didn't have to do any weird angle math manipulations on my hinges. And the table is still level, but we adjusted gravity so the ball would move forward. This will let you kick the ball up ramps or have it bounce off things or go down or up or however you'd like it to in the third dimension. But there we go. The easiest, most simple flippers I could think of for a Unity pinball game. All right. Have a good day.